Hello, I'm Father Robert Lauder. This is another session of the Catholic Novel. Today we're talking about a terrific novel, Morris West, The Devil's Advocate. Let me say right away how much I'm enjoying doing this series. A number of these books I read many years ago. Devil's Advocate I read about, believe it or not, 50 years ago. I read it in kindergarten. I'm only kidding. But I read it about 50 years ago, and looking at it again, it's just terrific. Now, the first line of this novel is this. It was his profession to prepare other men for death. It shocked him to be so unready for his own. And that is a great opening line, and in a sense, it sums up the entire novel. The main character is Monsignor Blaise Meredith. He's a Vatican bureaucrat. At the beginning of the novel, he discovers that he has cancer, and the most he's going to live is another year. And he has this feeling that his life has been largely wasted, that he has never really loved God deeply, and he has never been involved directly in an apostolate. And that's an interesting question. Has his life been a waste, or is it just that he is very hard on himself? Well, another part of the opening pages that I like very much is the cardinal that assigns him to his next assignment, which is to be the devil's advocate against a person named Giacomo Nerone, who was murdered by the communists near the end of the Second World War. And there are rumors that miracles have been performed in the name of this man and that he gave his life for others. So this is the assignment that the cardinal gives him. And I want to read to you this really touching talk that the cardinal gives to him. The cardinal has perceived that Blaise Meredith, and of course his first name Blaise, the Monsignor's first name Blaise, is ironic because he's not on fire. He seems to be kind of static and dried up and not dedicated. I mean, this is the image you get in the early pages. So this is what the cardinal says to him. What I have to say to you, Monsignor, is probably a presumption. I am not your confessor. I cannot look into your conscience, but I believe you have reached a crisis. You, like many of us here in Rome, are a professional priest, a career churchman. There is no stigma in that. It is much already to be a good professional. There are many who fall far short even of this limited perfection. Suddenly, you have discovered it is not enough. You are puzzled, afraid, yet you do not know what you should do to restore the lack. Part of the problem is that you and I and others like us have been removed too long from pastoral duty. We have lost touch with the people who keep us in touch with God. We have reduced the faith to an intellectual conception and an assent of the will because we have not seen it work in the lives of common folk. We have lost pity and fear and love. We are the guardians of mysteries, but we have lost the awe of them. We work by canon, not by charity. Like all administrators, we believe that the world would topple into chaos without us, that we carry even the church of God on our backs. It is not true, but some of us believe it till the day we die. You are fortunate that even at this late hour, you have been touched with dissatisfaction. Yes, even doubt, because I believe that you are now in the desert of temptation. The Blaise asks him, what can I do? And then the cardinal continues. He says, there is no passion in your life, my son. You have never loved a woman, nor hated a man, nor pitied a child. You have thrown yourself too long, and you are a stranger to the human family. You have asked nothing and given nothing. You have never known the dignity of need, nor gratitude for a suffering shared. This is your sickness. This is the cross you have fashioned for your own shoulders. This is where your doubts begin and your fears too, because a man who cannot love his fellows cannot love God either. I think that is really important. Most seminarians, especially diocesan seminarians, but most seminarians are trained to work in parishes. And nobody trains to work in a tribunal, or nobody trains to work in a chancery, or nobody trains as a seminarian to teach philosophy. And I have I'm a priest 57 years. I spent 4 years in a parish and 3 years studying and 50 years teaching philosophy. Now, I love being a priest and I love teaching philosophy, but being a parish priest is a very different experience emotionally from being a teacher. And I presume from working in the chancery or working in the tribunal, because you're always in contact with people who need help in a parish. I can teach a whole year and no student ever tells me, you're a great teacher, or this is terrific, and so on. You may get some compliments and an evaluation, or maybe someone writes to you 10 years later, and so on. But in a parish experience, you're right there on the front line with people. A couple of years ago, a doctor told me he didn't think doctors realized how much they get from their patients. Well, I would say the same thing. I don't think parish priests realize how much they get from their parishioners. So I did not choose to teach philosophy. The bishop called me in, told me he was building a college seminary, and asked me if I'd do it. And I don't regret it. Please don't misunderstand me. All I'm saying is I understand the adjustment that Blaise Meredith had to make. Now, is he right? Is he right that his life has been basically a waste? I think that's a really interesting question. When this novel came out, a priest who was one of my professors interpreted it a little differently. Let me tell you how the novel goes. He starts investigating this so-called saint. He's supposed to come up with arguments against the sainthood of this particular person. But as the novel develops, Monsignor Blaise Meredith is put into a number of very difficult pastoral situations. And in every single instance, he reacts just about perfectly. He helps a number of people. So here's the question. Has he been transformed by this work? Has he sort of become a saint by his work? Or was he always extremely holy, but didn't have the opportunity to work with people? Well, this professor of mine, who was a teacher, took the interpretation. He was always holy. He had done his job as well as he can do, and you can be a saint in any job. What happened was he now got the occasion to help people, and he was ready to do it right away. I don't know which interpretation Morris West wants us to take. The very fact that the cardinal says to Blaise Meredith, "I know what your problem is," sort of suggests that maybe Monsignor Meredith has kind of dried up. Now, here's what happens in the novel. As the novel develops, and Meredith is investigating Giacomo Nerone, our interest shifts from the sanctity of Giacomo Nerone to the sanctity of Monsignor Meredith. It's quite interesting how this happens. By the end of the novel, I remember back many years ago when I read it, was you were no longer really interested whether Giacomo Nerone was going to get converted or not, because you had just witnessed either the birth of a saint in Monsignor Meredith or the revelation of a saint who for years had been shuffling papers around in the Vatican. When I looked over this book again, you know what I was reminded of? The nun who told me many years ago that she got more out of reading Catholic novels than she got out of reading certain quote-unquote spiritual books. My guess is she meant books like The Imitation of Christ, The Introduction to Devout Life by Francis de Sales, maybe books by Marmi and Guardini. And I'm not putting down any of those books. Those are great books. But a really good novel should tell us something about ourselves. And somehow the novel, at least implicitly, should be about us. That is, as we go through this story, we have a chance to reflect on our own story. And that's the experience I've been having, looking back at these novels I read years ago. It's just been, this is definitely a labor of love, okay? Now, when people back in the 1940s, 1950s, whenever there was an article written about the Catholic novel, there were three names that always appeared: Graham Greene, Evelyn Waugh, and Francois Mauriac. You could count on it. If you saw a heading, where is the Catholic novel, or what is the Catholic novel, you could count on the fact that those three names are going to appear. I think Morris West, he may not be, those three novelists are great, great novelists. He may not be a great novelist, but he is an extremely good novelist. I would say this: he's a great storyteller. He lived many, many years in Rome. He knows the Vatican bureaucracy. He knows the piety of the Romans. He knows the setting, and he's able to weave a really good story. I've heard that there was a film made of this, but so far I've not been able to get the DVD. I will tell you who plays the lead, and not having seen the movie, I say he's a perfect choice, John Mills. You may remember him. He played the detective in The End of the Affair. I guess John Mills's main film was Great Expectations, when he plays the lead, the hero in Dickens' novel. So I'm still hoping to get a copy of that novel because of that film, because I know when Devil's Advocate came out, a number of people were interested in filming it, and I was delighted to find out that someone did. There is one. How can I put this? I'm not going to reveal the secret. There's a surprise in the novel, and I discussed this novel about a year ago with some seminarians, and none of them spotted it. And I have to confess, when I first read the novel, I didn't spot it either. My memory tells me that there was a priest who reviewed the novel for America magazine, and he revealed the secret. And once he revealed it, then it becomes very obvious. Once again, my memory may be playing tricks on me, but I think Morris West wrote to the priest and said how much he appreciated his review, and that the priest was one of the few people who spotted this kind of secret, this kind of surprise that's sort of buried isn't quite the right word, but it's not emphasized. It's only when you get it and you look back, and then it becomes very obvious. Now I think that's a sign of a great storyteller. I know now when we read reviews of books or films, they often say, it's a spoiler alert, because they don't want to tell you how something ends. And I don't want to tell you how this novel ends either, but I will tell you this. It's a journey of someone who is facing death. The most he's going to live is a year. And that's why that opening line is terrific. When we did The End of the Affair in the first session of the 8 Catholic novels, I told you the best page of any novel I've ever read is the first page on The End of the Affair. Well, the first page of Devil's Advocate doesn't match that, but the first sentence is really dynamite. His profession is to help other men face their death, and he's surprised how unprepared he is to face his own death. So right away, Morris West has us, okay? And then I'll leave it to you to interpret the novel the way you want to. I tend to think that Blaise Meredith was always a holy man. This is the interpretation I get. But he feels dried up. He tries to evaluate his life. He doesn't think he's been successful. And that can happen to all of us. That can happen to all of us, no matter whether we're priests or mailmen or doctors, any profession, or whether we run a TV camera. We can evaluate our lives and we say, I didn't really live up to my potential. So I think I want to strongly recommend it. I can't imagine anybody reading this novel and not liking it.